And then the one that I am really excited about is this one, which is an original 1987 made in Japan Fender Standard Model 2. So this was Fuji-Gen built during the sort of 1987 period. And it is a bit of a period piece because it's Fender Standard Telecaster Fender Standard Stratocaster in a world back then which was full of Superstrats. And what they did with this one was that they fitted this Kahler Superstrat kind of bridge. So it's got a floating trem on a knife point, 2-point trem with fine tuners and a lock nut at the top. So it's a mixture of sort of 80s big hair and classic Strat. So it's a bit of a museum piece. It is very rare. They were only built for 1 year, and I believe that the Kahler Trem was UK market only, from what I've been finding out. I know nothing about these trems, so I'm on a bit of a journey here, and I don't really use trems that much, so I wouldn't be the first person to put, you know, one of these super stratty dive bomby type trems on a Strat. But it's here, and I think it's really interesting. It's got a couple of additional switches. This one is a kill switch, and I've got no idea what this one is. It's a 3-position switch, but it doesn't do anything as far as I can see, so we'll soon find out when we get in there. It's got a 5-way switch. I don't know what's under the pickguard. I know that these pickups are, if they're the original Japanese Fuji-Gen ones, then they are Alnico 5. They're pretty well regarded, and once I get into this and get it set up, then we'll see what they sound like. The neck is really nice. It's rolled like a USA. The frets are possibly the mankiest frets I have ever seen in my life. But there's a reason for that. So the story of this guitar is that it was bought new by a gentleman in 1987, and it was his pride and joy, and he looked after it until unfortunately passed away in 2003. So it was in service for 16 years. And then since then it's been sat in his case. And I've just purchased it and another guitar from his daughter, who decided that it was time to let it go. And because I was able to show the kind of restoration work that I've done in some of the other Stratocasters, she was very happy that it was coming to me to get the full sort of sympathetic stripped down, deep clean and restoration, which I'm going to give it. So this is a little bit of a labour of, if not love, certainly a labour of respect for the gentleman concerned, and, you know, respect for the history of what's a slightly unusual but very high quality guitar. Even though it's filthy and covered in, I don't like to think what, underneath all of that it's got a few bashes in the finish, but really nothing significant, and certainly nothing which is any more than you would expect for a guitar which had been out and about and been played for 16 years. So assuming, and it is a big assumption, but if I assume that I don't find anything too nasty underneath all of this, then I think this is likely to be, this is quite a find. The only thing I'm worried about is this trem. Everything is seized solid, so the first thing I'm going to try and do is get the strings off it, get the trem off it, get the lock nut off it, and get them soaking in releasing agent to see if whether I can get this working. I do understand that if I can't get it working, if it's just too far gone, these are rare as hen's teeth, but there is, because it's 2-point, there is a more traditional, well, not fully traditional, but certainly a more traditional Wilkinson bridge, which drops straight in. The one advantage of this Kahler system compared to some of the other knife edge trems is that it uses a standard Stratocaster route, so so that's a plus. But I'm going to try and fix this and keep it all completely standard if I can. So first things first, to kick things off with the Japanese Strat, then as usual, first thing I'm going to do is get the strings off and see if I can get these components off and start freeing them up. So So these strings are not locked. So it's going through this locking nut, but it's not doing anything. I don't know whether that's a good sign or a bad sign, whether it makes any difference whatsoever. I've never had one of these. I was too young to have one of these in the 80s because I certainly couldn't afford Fenders back then, and I had an Antoria 1970s Strat copy, which I thought at the time was a poor man's substitute, and which now is quite a valuable lawsuit era Stratocaster, which I shamelessly hacked up and put some pretty terrible modifications to over the years. I put in a humbucker of unknown origin out of some random music shop, and I then later on in life I took the knackered pickguard and I replaced all the electronics and the whole guard with, I think it was a loaded scratch plate from Squire of all things. So to my shame and my horror, that's what I did to what probably now would turn out to be a reasonably valuable lawsuit collector's item. So sorry to anybody who deserves the apology for that one, but I'm going to try and do better with this one. So these strings are absolutely filthy, but I think that's probably much more to do with the fact that they've been sitting in a case unused rather than anything else. So, you know, nobody's to blame for that. But we can get her up and running, I am sure. The thing is, you just don't really want to be messing with this kind of stuff for too long before you can give it a bit of a clean, because it's not the most hygienic project. Right, that's those ones. So that's the strings are off, so that's good. So, I mean, the frets, goodness me. Let's get some close-ups. So here's the headstock. It's got E-series serial number, which I used to think was something special, but I'm reliably informed by those who know a lot better on the internet that it's not particularly. It just applied to all Japanese made instruments at the time, and they varied from fantastic high quality to not particularly special. I'm going to say that I think this one is pretty high quality just from what I've had a look at so far and how it feels. But let's see what it's like once we open it up and see if there's any model identifications on it and so on, which might give me a little bit more information. As you can see, the frets are absolutely manky. So that's going to need a serious cleanup. But they don't look particularly worn. So certainly, if it does need fret work, I think there's plenty of meat on there for me to do that and save them. I don't think I'm going to need to do any kind of refret here, hopefully. And then this trem, I mean, it's not that manky, but as I say, everything is just stuck. Probably you can see the kind of build-up of residue around the threads. So what I want to do ideally is to be able to lift it out and then give those a good soak before I do anything mechanical to them. So that's what I'm going to try and do now. So the trem arm, as you can see, is present, which is a big plus because these are also as rare as hen's teeth. And it's solid. I mean, that needs lubricating, but it's not stripped, so that's good. The Japanese models had this recessed rear cover, which is nice detail. I believe this Kahler system, it's a Kahler 2520, Kahler Traditional 2520. So designed as a drop-in replacement for a Stratocaster Trem. 2-point knife edge design, and can be used for all that big hair 80s dive bombing stuff, which I never got into. Let's see what's in here. Okay, so a bit dusty, as they always are, but pretty much a standard, well, completely standard Fender style trem from the back, which means hopefully the only thing holding it in place is those two screws at the front. So let's find out, shall we? So give that a bit of a clean. I'm just going to basically wipe it down as I go, just to get it a bit more sanitary, and then give it a full deep clean as I get into it. But, you know, underneath that slight layer of grime that built up in the case, it's clearly been looked after. And, you know, for what at that, if you sort of stop it in time when it was last used, in 2003, it was a 16-year-old guitar at that point. At which point you've got to say it's in really lovely condition. Okay. So I'm going to free up the trim. So far so good. Well, there you go, straight out. Well, that was easy. So, these are solid. The rollers are solid. It's all pretty solid, which is nice in the bodywork, but not what you want in a complicated piece of engineering. So let's see what we can do with the wonders of 3-in-1 oil and WD-40 to see if we can get that resurrected. But worst case scenario, 2-point trem, standard route, easy enough if I do need to do something different. It just seems a bit of a shame if we can't save the kind of P-Rays features of it, because, you know, who would have... don't think I've seen many Strats with a kind of Strat style trem, and although it's not something I would dream of buying or building or specifying in its own right, when you come across it as a barn find straight out of 2003 and straight out of the late 80s, I think you need to respect what you've got. And if I can do, and I can save it, then I will. And in the meantime, I'll make it a little bit more hygienic to actually work on. Okay. So that's that. So let's see what happens at this end then. Some very suspicious looking stuff floating around here. I think I might be burning these rags. But underneath it, you get a very lovely little strap. Right, now my understanding is that that comes off with those 4 bolts, or those 4 screws. So let's see if I get just as lucky at that end as I did at the other end. Having the right screwdriver, of course, helps. So that's moving. Yeah. Easy. that's great news. So that's coming out too. I suppose one of the questions with a Strat like this is, what is the actual market for it? Is it the 1980s enthusiast who wants to keep it completely standard and will value it as it is? Or is it somebody who's going to look at it from a more modern, perhaps, perspective and say, okay, what you have here is a 1987 MIJ Strat with, other than these 4 holes, reasonably sort of classic appointments. So we shall see. I think the deciding factor is obviously going to be the trem. If I can get the trem up and running and working correctly, then I will rebuild it with those, in the knowledge that it turns out it's pretty easy to take this stuff off. I mean, if that is an absolute block to being able to sell it on, then I can always put a more traditional 2-point Strat trem on it. In which case it's just a very lovely late 80s candy apple red Strat. I mean, it is gorgeous. Okay. I am going to try out my new acquisition, which I am very excited about. Which, if any of you have been watching the channel and seen how much time I spend masking up to work on frets, this could be my saviour. So this is a Music Nomad fret shield, and I've bought one for 24.75 scale Epiphones and one for 25.5 inch scale Fenders, which I think is going to make me very happy. So basically, you can see what it is. It's a stainless steel shield, which basically takes it's like a complete set of those little stainless steel fret shields that you use just for doing an individual fret, but it just lays over the whole fretboard and means you can work on all the frets at the same time, which I have to say is a game changer, because I hate those little ones, the little individual fret shields. Nothing but a pain in the backside, but I'm not wild about all the time I spend masking up and demasking either. And I'm probably doing, at the moment, because I'm churning a lot of stock, I'm doing, look at that. Now that is fun, I like it. So I'm probably doing, on average, at least a fret job a day. Either a full level crown and polish, or at least enough of a polish that I want to get under it with, full masking. So I don't know what this is going to require yet, but I'm just going to attack it a little bit with my fret rubbers and just see how it comes up. Right then, let's have a look. So I'm starting at the wrong end. Let's not do that. What I want is 180 grit and get right through it. They look good. Those look really good. Nothing wrong with those frets. I'm just doing this first pass just to get the worst of the grime off it. I will of course give them a full, much more thorough seeing to, but look at that, it comes up beautifully. I'm still in two minds about dremeling frets. I've tried it a few times. It might be better with this guard actually. I've seen it used. I saw there was a guy I was watching on YouTube that I first saw these guards, and he was using one of these and then his Dremel, and it did come up really well, but I always find I have fairly patchy results with it, and I'm not convinced that it actually gives me better results than just going up through the fret rubbers. I mean, you've still got to start, if you're doing an actual fret job with a fret level crown polish, you've got to start with your lower grit sandpapers and work up through the sandpapers anyway, so it's not like it saves a huge amount of time. But I do think for jobs like this, which it really doesn't look like it's going to need any actual fret work, it's going to be about polishing them up, then this thing is a game changer, because I wouldn't do this with this heavy. This is a 180 grit rubber, and I just wouldn't use this on an unprotected fretboard of any kind, even though I suspect there's a layer of grime on this fretboard that's coming off, which should probably be protecting it fully anyway. But so that's it with the heavy ones. So let's see if we'll try and polish it a little bit. So this is going straight to the 1500 one, which is probably too big a leap, but and then to 2000, which is the one you end with. So as you can see, that's made a huge difference. The frets are, I'm trying to show, so that one there in the middle is the one that's had the 180 grit rubber and then 1500 and 2000, and even just with that, that's a pretty decent looking fret. I mean, I can make it better, and the fretboard itself is going to need some work to clean it up, but these frets are completely serviceable. And as I say, there's a little bit of, yeah, just indentations a little bit in the first fret on the G string, first, second and third. So yeah, I mean, that's probably a little bit of leveling there, but I might not, because it's probably not going to affect playability, and I don't really want to do anything too invasive with this guitar. Okay, so let's pop this off and have a look. This thing is pretty good, pretty expensive. I think it was about £50, but I've got to say, if I do one or two of these a day at the moment, and that takes me probably an hour, or saves me probably an hour, being able to just do that and not have to spend all that time masking up. So there you go. So fifth, so that 8th fret is the one that's had the extra polish. But look at that, I mean, considering how grimy it was. So I'm going to attack that with a credit card and some lemon oil and get some life back into that fretboard. But that's the result, I'd say. So that seems like a good start. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the neck off to see what's in there. I'm going to open up the pick guard and see what's in there, and I'm going to get some oil onto that trem. So come back and check in for the next exciting installment. So I am cracking on with the fretboard, which is coming along a treat. So I started off gently scraping off as much of the crud as I could, and then I realised that actually what worked best for that was a fret rubber, which doesn't damage the wood, but it does give it a good thorough scrubbing. So I've been over the whole fretboard a couple of times and all the frets with 180 grit, which has come up really well. And now I'm jumping up on the frets themselves, so I'm just going over it for a second pass with 1000 grit rubber, which is adding significantly to the levels of shine. And then so I'm going to do it at 1000 and then 1500 and then 2000, and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to give it a thorough lemon oiling and a good scrub with the brush just to get anything out of the pores. And then I'm going to let that dry overnight, and then I'm going to polish the frets again. But I have to say they're coming up beautifully. Whether they're level or not, I don't know, but I suspect they will be. I just have a hunch about it. They're all beautifully ended. They've very nicely crowned. So yeah, I am very impressed. This is, however, whilst it's satisfying for me, it's a rather tedious watch, so I'm not going to make you sit through all of it. So this is the end result of the efforts with the neck. So it's come up really nicely. So that's had good going over with the fret rubbers, and then it's had a 2 or 3 coats, well 2 coats I think, of lemon oil. So it comes off, we've got LST562K. So I don't know if the ST562 is model code for the neck, code for the overall model. Obviously ST Strat 56 I assume is 56. So anybody who knows more about Jap strats, please do let me know. So this is what I'll call phase 1. So it's been thoroughly wiped down, cleaned. I've got the bridge out and soaking overnight. I've got the fretboard cleaned up and oiled, and turns out that underneath all that muck there was a very nice Stratocaster. So good start, very pleased. But now, having got the bridge out and seeing if I can rescue it with those last couple of grub screws, it's time to get into this beast. And this thing is full of surprises, because I wasn't expecting this. I have got an active circuit of some kind. Don't know what yet, but this is about as 80s as it gets, isn't it? Love it. There is a fair amount of some kind of liquid been floating about in here. So whether any of these electronics are going to be savable or not, I don't know. They do work though. They do. Certainly the pickups do. Whether the active stuff is goosed, what it even does, I don't know. I'll need to try and investigate. Yeah, I'm going to have to try and figure out what the hell's going on with all this wiring, but it's obviously there's some corrosion there on the back of the pot. The pots themselves are full sized. All looks very neat. And so these, I guess, are the original Fuji-Gen Alnico pickups. They're certainly not ceramics with bar magnets or anything, so that's a positive. So unhelpfully, the gaffer tape that was holding it in place has taken off the stickers saying what it actually is. So it looks like a KOC Yeah, I don't know. And then it's got GPA something, GPA Deluxe perhaps, it ends in UXE, so GPA Deluxe. So it runs to, it's not actually a kill switch, it must have been a power switch of some kind, on and off for this active circuit. What I thought was a kill switch was actually, I guess, switching between the standard circuitry and the active, you know, sort of a bypass, because the normal standard electronics do work. The battery, I'll need to replace, well, if I do anything with it, I'll need to replace the battery holder, because it's actually, it's broken off. But that's fine, I've got a drawer full of those, it's not a problem. And it's got a stereo output jack, which is fun. So, yeah. I'm assuming that this is all aftermarket. I've never heard of a standard model with this stuff. And given that it was held in with gaffer tape, I'm assuming that it's not standard. But it's certainly interesting. So, yeah, let me see if you can figure out what does what. Okay, so as far as I can see, we've got this whole system here is completely downstream of the normal electronics, because it comes off the output wire, or the output lug here, and there's one wire runs into this grey wire, and there's an earth wire comes out of it and earths onto there. So that then runs over here to this, which was the two-way switch. So that's the on and off switch. And then that runs into this control unit over here. That then feeds back on to the two-pole switch here. So you've got 3 positions in that, which is controlled in this box here. And then the power is supplied from this battery down here, and then the output runs out to this stereo output here. So apart from the fact that this doesn't work because the battery cover has broken, I'm just going to stick a battery in it and see if it does anything, because it's going to be fun. The rest of the wiring's fairly standard. I don't really understand the switch. It's not one I'm familiar with, because it's all in a row, which I think I've got a diagram for. I think I've seen one of those before somewhere. But I'm sure it's basically just replicating the usual positions. And then there was a whole bunch of crusty crap here, which basically the tone control, or the tone capacitor, was, it's weird that it went all crusty and it broke off. So I don't know whether it was just a really bad solder joint which had completely broken down, but I've never seen that before. But anyway, so that needs to go back on when I decide what I'm doing with this wiring. I mean, the rest of it doesn't look too bad. It's a decent sized pots. If this thing doesn't work, which I'm almost certain that it won't, then I'll probably just rip it out, and I might use the two-way switch. I might do a Gilmore mod with it and just use that as a switch for bringing back the neck pickup, or not. So I might just rewire it mostly to standard and put in a standard, you know, normal CRL switch, which will make a bit more sense. I might take the whole lot out and just put in standard Strat wiring, but keep the pickups. But let me stick a battery in this and see if I can make it work, just for fun. Well, it lives of sorts. I'm no closer to figuring out what the hell it actually does. So that appears to be my normal normal wiring switched over with this top switch because this bottom one has got no appreciable impact. Switched like that. If I switch it the other way, then I'm getting nothing. I am getting some slight difference there, I think. So, neck pickup, top micro switch down the way, that's I've lost my position 4. So I've got position 3. I've lost position 4, that's still middle pickup only. And then position 5 works. Okay, so that's a bit weird. So, time for a quick progress update on the various aspects of the Strat. So, the Trem, I'm going to call this a kind of 80% success so far. So, I've got all of the saddles moving. I've got all of the fine tuners moving. And I've got 5 out of the 6 rollers moving, so that's all good. This one is stuck a little bit. It does move, but not very well. So I think it's distorted on its little axle. And then the limiting factor, I think, is that I've got every single one of these grub screws, apart from this one, freed up. So the limit on this bridge is if I can get that grub screw out somehow, and I'm still hopeful of finding a way to do that, then this will be a usable bridge because I'll be able to intonate it, I'll be able to height adjust it. If I can't, there's a small possibility that it was set correctly and it's just set at the right height, so it'll still be usable, but I wouldn't like to be limited that amount in my setup. So at the moment I'm putting this to, I have identified that I can't find these grub screws. There's a website in the US which deals in parts for these, which for an absolutely enormous amount of money for a tiny part, or I might try and see if I can source an identical one. They are smaller than standard grub screws for Fender compatible bridges, so it's not one of those, but I'm not going to give up on that. So this is going in the possible reuse pile. If I can get that working, then I will do. But in the meantime, I have ordered a fairly basic Wilkinson bridge, which is compatible with the existing bridge posts, and it'll work fine. Certainly for a non-tremolo user like me, and it'll get the guitar up and running. But it's a shame because I got so close with this that I thought, yes, I'm actually going to get that fully operational. and I may still do so, and it's got the original whammy bar, so hopefully I'll get that up and running and back on the guitar, but if not, it will certainly go with the guitar in the future if I do anything else with it. So that's the Trem update. The next one is the wiring update. So on the pickguard, I have now taken it out, and I have now stripped off the additional wiring for the additional electronics, the active boost. The tone control had come detached, so I've resoldered that. All this other wiring is present and correct, and the switch feels pretty good. I mean, it is a plastic one, not a metal one, but it's very positive. It clicks nicely. So I think I'm just going to reuse this completely as it is for now, and then I'll see what it's like in service. But, you know, it's decent sized pots. They all feel okay. Obviously, I'll give them a good blast full of switch cleaner, and I'll give this all a good clean up before I put it back in, but that's looking good. I have retained all the wiring for this with its stereo output jack, and I did test it with a battery, so I got it active, but it still didn't seem to be doing a huge amount. It was doing something. I'm going to investigate further to figure out what it's supposed to do. So that's another one which goes in the spare parts box. And then the rest of it's pretty simple. We've seen the neck's looking good. This is the body, standard kind of routing, 2-point bridge, standard 56mm 2-point trem. Not much else to say about that really, other than it's in good condition. So I'm going to give it a good clean out. I'm going to give everything a clean, and then once the bridge arrives early part of next week, I'm going to reassemble it in a more standard kind of format without the Superstrats appointments until I can get them operational, at which point I'll swap them back in, and then it'll be good to go. So watch this space for further developments. If in doubt, get it cleaned and then get some wax on it. That's a good start. Always feels like you're on the start of the rebuild at this point. So generally what I do is wax everything before I reassemble it, and that way I know that it's got everywhere under the guard. This body's in really good shape, considering it's 16 years in service and then laid up for over 20 years. So that's all good. So in the meantime, I will clean and polish that. I will put the body to one side. I will get into the pick guard. I'll strip this down and give this a good clean. Nicely aged pickup covers. You can see they're sort of yellow, but then they're still white underneath. So there's no shielding on this. I might actually add in, I've got a shielding plate that I could put in if it's the same size, which it might be. yeah, it's the same hole pattern. So I might add that just for a bit of extra shielding. And since I've got my so I could, is that standard? Different hole pattern, I think. Yes. So I'll probably stick with the original scratch plate because there's no real advantage to swapping it for another white one. Of course I could, just while I've got my guards, I could go mother of toilet seat with candy apple. That actually looks quite nice. Could do black one. If I was going to go black, I would probably get an actual black one as opposed to that. And then if I wanted to be really garish, I don't think so. Although it doesn't look that bad. I mean, obviously not, but I think maybe this one, maybe on a black one at some point. I've never found one that it really works, and I don't really like the edges of it. But as a thought. But I think I will stick with the original. Keep it all nice and original Japanese before people start shouting at their screens and telling me not to be an idiot and add non-standard parts. There's plenty of other strats for the other pieces. Yeah, so I will deep clean all of this, get rid of all the goop. Just out of interest, I've just taken this 2-point Trem US Standard out of the USA parts caster that I'm doing at the moment. I just wanted to check whether a US 2-point will fit as a kind of potential option B if I can't get the Kahler working, and the answer is yes, it does. It fits perfectly on the existing studs, which is good to know. I'm hoping not to have to do that, but that might be a better option than an aftermarket one. So after a liberal application of switch cleaner, wax, elbow grease, and a little bit of soapy water, this is all the plastics cleaned up and ready to fit back in. I've cleaned all the electronics, given a good blast of switch cleaner. I've fixed the ground onto the tone capacitor, and I've cleaned up all the pickups and everything. I did consider whether I could fix the treble boost system that was in it, but I just can't figure out what to do with it, and I'm not sure that it actually adds much value. Wouldn't you just use a pedal anyway if you wanted that sort of thing? The only downside to it, of course, is that I've got these two holes in the pickguard, which I am considering what to do with. I did consider just switching out the pickguard, but I've tried a Mexican one and I've tried an American one, and neither of them fit the holes exactly. And I don't really want to be drilling and filling holes in this body, so particularly when the only thing wrong with this pickguard is those two holes. So at the moment I am thinking that I might just cannibalise the switches and put them back in, and then maybe wire one up as a neck always on, Gilmore style, and then the other one perhaps as just as a kill switch. I'm not sure what else I can do. It's not like I can split coils or anything on single coils, so I'll have a think about what to do with the other switch, but I'll probably just put them back in and put it back to the way that it was, even though the functionality is not there, or the functionality has changed inside. So as a dry fit, this is what she's going to look like. I'm not proposing to put back on the string locker. It seems pretty pointless. I may, well, no, I think if somebody wants that, then they can put on some modern locking tuners would be a better solution, but I will include it. The bridge has come up nicely. I'm still waiting on just one grub screw to see if I can fix the internet or the string height issue on the bottom E, which is the one where the grub screw is completely trashed. Now I understand that basically these bridge posts are adjustable, and they're actually the way that you set the string height, and that the adjusters on the saddles are mainly for setting the curvature. So I may well, if I can't get that grub screw working, I may set it up anyway and just see whether that is actually true and whether I can get, you know, a good playing action out of it. Because, you know, I've got the height adjustability with the screws anyway. So I'm not giving up on this bridge. The 80s are still going to rule with this one way or the other. And then plan B, if I really can't get that working in the end, is that I've got a USA classic bridge that I can put on, which will also work. But let's try and keep it all Japanese. And by keeping it all Japanese, I mean, of course, put the original Kahler made in the USA bridge back on it, which is slightly ironic. So we've reached the moment of truth for the Kahler bridge. So I have managed to use a combination of brute force, heat, lots of WD-40, and got it completely stripped and got all of the saddles working so that the rollers now run cleanly. I've replaced all of the grub screws for the height adjustments, and then the intonation adjustments and the fine tuning mechanisms, they all work. So the last and outstanding piece is one seized grub screw in this saddle. So that is my last challenge to getting a fully functional Kahler bridge, which I'm about to go to my final resort of drilling out the grub screw, which is fine because I've managed to source a whole bunch of them, like 100 grub screws for like £5, I think it was, or something like that. So yeah, wish me luck. This is if we get this bit past, then the Kahler is up and running, and then I need to figure out how to actually set the damn thing up, but that's a whole different ball game. So Stratocaster update time. So I've been doing a lot of work on the Kahler. I have replaced all of the grub screws in the bridge saddles to get them all turning and give us height adjustability in there. I've freed up all the other components, so all the fine tuners work, all the rollers in the bridge, they all turn freely, and it will all move in, all the saddles move for intonation purposes. So that is now a fully functional bridge, and it's put back in, and it is held in with the springs. The only thing that I couldn't free up was this height adjustment grub screw on the bottom E string. It was just too corroded, and it wouldn't come out and it wouldn't drill out either. But having said that, I think, as my understanding is that basically the height adjustment in this bridge is done via these adjustable posts, in the same way as a tune-o-matic would be, and that these height adjustments are essentially for radius. So I'm going to try setting it up with these for radius based on that being at a fixed height, and assuming that all works, then that will give me full adjustability and a fully usable bridge, which, given that it is a pretty rare original 80s Kahler, and it comes with its whammy bar, which is also apparently like hen's teeth, I'm pretty pleased with that. I think that's a good save. So that's where I got to with the bridge. And then on the pick guard, so I took out the corroded and basically melted mid-boost system that was in there, and it did leave me with the two holes. So I filled those with mini switches, because I'd rather have it looking the way it was when I got it, even though that it's not the same functionality. And then I've been thinking what to do with these. So this one I have wired up, and I've wired this up as a neck on switch, you know, the Gilmore mod. So that's in place, which I think, you know, that's perfectly justifiable, because that's been around for donkey's years, and people were certainly doing that in the 80s. And what I've done is, where I've used non-standard wiring, then I've used red, so that it's clear that it is an addition. And the other thing I had to do was, I had to change to a metal switch. The one that was in it was just, I couldn't get it operating correctly. It was only giving me the 1, 3 and 5. It wasn't giving me the in-between positions. So whether that was me being stupid, or whether the switch is actually knackered, I think it's the latter. I'm certainly going to claim that anyway. But all the rest of the wiring is original. The pickups are original. I've regrounded the tone pot, and then I'm just considering what to do with this other switch, rather than just leaving it decorative. And what I think I'm going to do is, I'll take it out again and I'll put in a double pole switch, and then what I will do is, again, a period style mod, which is to then run wiring from the middle pickup, which will give me that switch as a series parallel switch, which will mean that when I've got positions 2 and 4, then I can have the normal standard neck and bridge, or sort of neck and middle, or bridge and middle. Or with that switch, I can also put them as series, which will give you the same kind of faux humbucker effect as you get in a 4-way Telecaster switch, which is a sound that I quite enjoy. So that'll give the guitar a little bit of extra tonal option, and it'll be pretty non-invasive. I mean, the holes are already there, so I'm using them up in a sensible way. And I'll do the same, so that the wiring that I put in, I'll make sure it's a different colour from the stock white, so that so it's easy enough to sort of identify what you then just take back out. I mean, basically there isn't much to it. You just move the wires from the pickups to the switch, run a jumper, and then run them over to this switch. So it should be an easy mod, and I think that will give me a nice, you know, a nice end result. Really versatile Strat, and very much an 80s period piece. I've cleaned up the locking nut, which will go back on here, and then I'll get it strung up, and then I will address the challenge of trying to set up the Kahler. Building it, rebuilding it, fixing it might be one thing, but getting it actually operating and floating and working the way it should do might be quite another. So watch this space. So I think we're on to the home straight now with the MIJ. So I've got the trem system restored and refitted. I've got the pick guard refitted, with the electronics modifications, I suppose, to get these switches doing something useful. Everything works fine, and I did a lot of work on cleaning up the neck at an earlier stage, to make sure to see what was under there. It now needs just finessing, so I'm going to give it a fret dress, and then give it a proper polish up, and then get it all back together again, and have a go at this trem system and set up, which should be interesting. So you can see I've masked up the neck and marked it out. I'm just going to give it a very gentle and light dress, just to take the wear out the tops of these frets. Some of them are starting to get a bit pronounced. And then I'll spend more time on the crowning, because that's something that hasn't really been done on this guitar, and some of them are pretty broad and need to be brought back to a proper curvature. So that's what I'm going to do now. So another one done. Very pleased with this one. It was in a hell of a state when I got it, and I just felt that with the the story attached to it, it deserved a little bit of TLC and to have a second life. And I'm delighted with how well it's come up. Yes, it's got a few little dinks in it, but really nothing that you wouldn't expect on a 37-year-old guitar. I'm really pleased that I've been able to resurrect the Kahler Trem system. It's a bit of a period piece, it's very complicated. The locking system at both ends does seem to work, it will stay in tune. I think there's a reason why the modern world has moved on to locking tuners though. This thing's not the most attractive, and it's functionally, it works. I wasn't able to save the treble boost system that was on board, but then that wasn't original anyway, so that's not a problem. I wasn't able to save the 5-way switch, it was goosed. But other than that, it's all the original electronics. And then just to use up the holes, I've got the Gilmore mod bringing the net pickup back in, and I've got the series switch which puts these two pickups on, and that actually sounds really good, and if you put the three of them on, it sounds mega. So that is the sort of thing that people were doing to these things back in the 80s, so I don't feel too bad about that. And it's all completely reversible. So this is going to be going on my reverb site. These go for a substantial amount of money, I have to say. Now, whether they actually sell for that or whether they're listed for that, I guess I'm going to find out. But I don't expect it to sell fast because it is a period piece and not everybody is looking for a half superstratted Stratocaster. But I think it's a really lovely guitar. I'm quite happy to have it sitting around with me, and I'll be playing it a fair amount. So I hope you found that interesting, and thanks for watching. I know this was a long one, so thank you for your perseverance if you've stuck it all the way through. And as always, if you've enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you back in the shack soon.